This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. Joining me this week, two rough and tumble teens waiting for a scuffle behind the milkshake parlor, Brian Murray.
Give me your lunch money.
And Kate Scotchless.
This is all I have.
Wait, who's fighting who? Oh, this is episode 293 of I Read Comic Books. I'm so very excited to be talking about comic books this week with Brian and Kate. So let's just get right into things. Oh, I guess before we get started, I should say we do have a hangout coming out on August 21st, 2021. If you want to come hang and chat with us on Discord, you can do that at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. And then you can join us on the 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to just do this talk show style thing that we do for a few hours. It's really, really fun. And we always have a riot during that time. And also I want to say, because it's episode 293, if you start to count in your head, you'll notice that episode 300 is coming. We've got some pretty big plans coming, so I hope you are excited. Stick around, continue listening to IRCB. We really appreciate it. I just wanted to let everybody know, just when you count upwards, you eventually hit milestones. We're about to hit one. I'm very excited. So let's get into comics. Let's talk about what we usually do every single week. And I have to ask two questions to do that. And that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Brian.
I've been pretty good. I'm still kind of like shaking off the dust from our month off, but I did manage to hop on Hoopla and find some good stuff to read.
Nice.
Yeah, I also read Department of Truth Volume 1. This is written by James Tynion IV, with art by Martin Simmons and letters by Aditya Bidikar. So this book gets a lot of praise.
Uh-oh.
I don't like it very much. It's one of those things where I'm certainly not saying that it's not good. It is like very well executed. I simply do not enjoy it.
Okay.
I think that maybe if there wasn't such like a real thread of there's no such thing as real truth, then like if that wasn't such a thing in the real world, I might appreciate this book more.
Sure.
But I see what they're trying to do with it, and I respect it. I just don't think I'm going to read Volume 2.
Okay.
The art is also, again, like very good, and I don't like it at all for a comic.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because this is a book I really love. I'm sure that you've heard me say that many times on the show. But at the same time, I can completely understand why this might not be someone's bag, because I think Martin Simmons as a creator Martin Simmons as an artist is a very jarring artist. Like, his style, definitely not for everyone. Reminds me a lot of, I don't know, like Bill Sienkiewicz when he goes really, really out there. And there's a couple of other artists too that Nick compared Simmons' art to the cover artist who did a lot of the Sandman stuff way back in the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can definitely feel like how just looking at that, it's a bit much. Like, every single page is a lot to take in. Not just like that there's a lot on the page to look at, but it's just a very vibrant everything. So I definitely can get why the art would turn you off. But in the story, I don't know, I for some reason just want to be scared, and I love this book. So not going to try to convince you to keep reading it, but I will say the second arc is probably the favorite bits so far.
Yeah, so that is also on my list. I actually already checked it out from Hoopla because of Mike's recommendation. And so it'll be interesting to see whose side I end up on in terms of this. But it sounds slightly like stylistic in a way that it isn't for everyone.
Yeah, and like I said, it's very cool, and I feel like I would love like a Martin Simmons art book where I just have those illustrations that I can look at.
Sure.
But trying to follow a narrative through that art when everything is so, and again, like I know why they're doing it. Like it's everything is very muddy and subjective, just like reality is in the narrative of the book. It just doesn't personally work for me as a way to experience a narrative.
Yeah, I have certain stylized art forms in comics that I'm like, I get that you're talented and this is your thing and this is cool. It just doesn't appeal to me, and I have a hard time following it.
But yeah, I guess the only thing I will say is, I mean, if the first arc didn't sell you, then I don't know what to tell you. That's totally fine. But the second arc has a bunch of Bigfoot stuff, and it's been fantastic. I will talk about it in a minute. But I guess, Kate, for you, how have you been? How have comic books been?
I've been good. I got to go up to Sleeping Bear Dunes National Park for a few days, doing exclusively outdoor stuff. I'm not about getting that Delta variant, but it was really cool. Watched a lot of cool trails, saw some beach, sat on beach, all the fun stuff. and have since returned to my normal life a few days ago, and it has made all the trail walking I do around here feel like, oh, this used to be really like pretty and gorgeous to me, but now I know what it could be, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I've been doing a fair amount of reading. I have been continued since last we spoke on the podcast with my OGN from the library kick, as like the library is one of the few places I can go in person still. In fact, it's the only place I can go in person in public, other than like doctor's offices. So I continue to put things on hold and pick them up like that. And I this week read The Witch Boy by Molly Ostertag, which is the first OGN in a series of 3. I don't know if it's supposed to be more, like if it's continuing or not. I should have checked on that before the show, but right now there's 3 volumes. And I waited for this on hold for roughly 1,000 years, which I think is actually about a month. But like, it is one of those books that are my local library. It's like a middle grade, so it's from the kids section. There are certain kids graphic novels that you like just can't get your hands on for like a month or 2 or 5. So like this one, and then the other one was Snapdragon. I finally got in on hold. I haven't read it yet, but these apparently are real popular with the youth. So I guess you'd say that I've become like very hip and in touch.
Yes.
But this one, if you guys haven't heard of it, it came out a few years ago when it was pretty popular. So most of you probably have. But it's about a 13-year-old boy in a family of folks with supernatural powers, where the girls do witchcraft and the boys become shapeshifters and fight demons. But this is 13-year-old boy that wants to do witchcraft and is talented at witchcraft, even though he's not supposed to. And everyone, it's very much an allegory for being queer or trans. And it's really well done. I mean, it's very predictable in the way that these middle grade novels are usually, like, especially when there's like a point to it. It's not like his family was going to, in the end, reject him and force it, and he was going to like go be a shape-shifting boy and hunt demons the rest of his life. Like, it's pretty clear what's going to happen, but in a sweet way that made me instantly put the next volume on hold, you know? And I like her art style and storytelling style. And like, there's characters that you really like, even though it's predictable, she's so good at writing characters that like you care about and feel real, like with their dialogue and expressive, you know, facial art and stuff. And then I'm also reading, I'm in the middle of it. So like if something terrible happens at the end of this book, don't blame me. Don't be like, Kate, you told me this would be heartwarming and wonderful, and then you ruined my life. I don't know yet. I'm like halfway through Kodi by Jared Klum, but I'm fairly confident that you'll be okay, because again, this is middle grade and they don't like to break our hearts quite as much as the adult ones.
I mean, some of these books do try to teach kids about like the harshness of life.
They do, but it's like, so here's the thing. Early in the pandemic, I was like getting like caught up with all the like adult OGNs that I wanted to read, and so many of them are so depressing. It's just like, here's a memoir of my tragic childhood, or like here's the thing about real life and how awful humans are, and the real monster is man.
You guys like serial killers?
Yeah. And so that's where I like ended up. Not that I'm not reading any of those right now. Like I definitely still have some in the rotation, but like doing a lot more like catching up on middle grade. The other thing is, one of my friends here is a middle school librarian who keeps throwing like really good recommendations my way. And then I read them and she's always right. So like, she's like, you should read The Witch Boy. And I'm like, God damn, I should. So Kodi is beautiful. Kodi is watercolor art, which, you know, I'm a sucker for the watercolor comics. Like it gets me every time. And it's about a little girl who's living with her grandma in the summer in a cottage in Alaska. And like, just from that, the aesthetics and the watercolor in the house, like I just want to live in this comic. It's so beautiful. And then she comes across an injured bear. And so naturally she like helps it and befriends it, because this is middle grade. And then they get separated because she has to return home to Seattle. And Kodi, the bear, has to do whatever it takes to reunite with his fragile human friend. And it's very like it's stylized where she's like maybe a 1/20th the size of this bear. It's just so beautiful. Even if the story wasn't good, which so far it is, I would still love this comic just for how gorgeous it is. And with the landscapes and just like, oh, it's so good. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I was furiously Googling something because I knew I had seen stuff from Molly Ostertag before and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I saw that Fur in the chat was saying The Girl from the Sea was a solid book by her, but I knew like their art from something else, and it was actually from Strong Female Protagonist, which is like a 2-volume series.
Yeah, strangely
enough, written by Brennan Lee Mulligan, which like I didn't know. I didn't like it very much, but I liked the art okay. But of course, I don't remember when I read that book, so I feel like I must have read it in like a bad place, or I just have this weird feeling in my head about it. But I like their art, so I don't know. Anyways, let me just talk about some comics that I read, because let's talk about some things that are very weird that a lot of people don't like.
Okay.
And I think that would be the Megahex series. This is by Simon Hanselman. I read 3 volumes of this series because I can't stop reading it, because it's like watching a car crash over and over and over, watching just something awful happen, like a natural disaster that no one can stop. I read Megg and Mogg in Amsterdam. I read One More Year, and I read Bad Gateway, and these all take place like in this Megahex world. The idea is Megg and Mogg are a witch and a cat who are dating. They're living together with their friend Owl. Megg and Mogg watch a lot of TV and smoke a ton of pot. When they're not doing that, they're drinking. And when they're not doing that, they're doing other drugs. And they hang out with their friend Werewolf Jones, who's even worse than them. There's a lot of sex. There's a lot of vomiting. The story is about like being depressed and living in a life where you have no drive, and you are unsuccessful because of your laziness, and you constantly are doing all the wrong things because you don't care about yourself or anyone around you. It's a really mean comic, like in the sense that all the characters are really mean to each other. There's like a lot of what I call fuck you comedy in this book, where you see people doing bad things or treating others badly, and for me there's something really funny in that.
Okay.
I don't know what that says about me. It's one of those things where you're watching someone do something so bad, you're like, I'm glad that this isn't me, and I would never do this, but it's interesting to see play out. And because it's fiction, it feels like there's an innocence to it. I don't know how to describe it. The series is very like, it's not nice. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, between each volumes, there's a story that happens, but it's also a series of strips. So like if you go and preview this book like on Comixology or something, you'll see that there's this bright green witch character and there's this cute little cat, but they are, telling each other to fuck off or having sex with each other. Or like it is an absurd comic. I mean, there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of drugs. It's all very casual. It's all very depressing and dark, but very funny at the same time in some ways. Some of it's very like, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever read. Like the last volume that I read, Bad Gateway, has an ending that I was like, oh, this is how you're going to end it, Hanselman? This is really fucking me up. But other bits are funny, where you just see people do bad things, and it's kind of funny in that regard. I don't know. I guess when I say bad things, I mean, like, I don't know. It's funny to watch people be mean to each other for the sake of it.
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia effect.
Yes. Thank you. Exactly that. So yeah, it's really weird, but Hanselman's art is very pretty in a lot of ways. It's simple. It's cartoony. It very much feels like what you would expect out of a strip comic. And this is all of the Megahex books are a series of like 1 to 30-page stories that take place in the same universe of just like stories about Megg and Mogg, or Megg and Mogg and their friend Owl, or Werewolf Jones, or Dracula Jr., or Wizard Mike, like all of these weird characters that work together in this world, where everyone's just kind of doing drugs and working dead-end jobs just for the sake of getting by so they can get more drugs. So ultimately, I don't know if I'd recommend this to anyone. I wouldn't say, hey, you would like this. I think if you want to try something that's very, very independent and kind of odd and out there, that's very dark and raw, because I think that there is some heart to like these characters, and it is very small, but there is some heart to a handful of these characters, and it's a really interesting book, but I find it to be extremely addicting. I read 3 volumes in 24 hours, and this is like 200 plus pages each. So yeah, I read that. I don't recommend it, but you should all read it at the same time. The other thing I want to talk about really quick is Department of Truth number 11. I know, Brian, you said you weren't a fan, but I feel like issue number 11 is the best issue of the series by a long shot. I know that a lot of people who read Tynion's books in general are really not a fan of his prose that he's just dropping into a lot of his comics. Like, he did it in Nice House on the Lake very recently. He's been doing it in Department of Truth. I feel like the stuff in Nice House on the Lake is tough to follow because we don't know the characters, whereas Department of Truth is a series of journal entries from a character, and I don't think that you could have done the story that Tynion was trying to do in this arc without having these kinds of journal pages about someone trying to discover Bigfoot, because the whole arc is about Bigfoot, which I absolutely love. So yeah, I thought it was amazing, like the best issue of the series so far, and the ending was superb. Absolutely top-notch, wonderful, hitting the nail on the head. Everything that he promised you in the first 4 or 5 issues played out in such a beautiful way. I was a big fan of it. Danny in the chat is saying, life hack, skip the prose. Danny, if you skip the prose in this book, I'm going to come for you. I'm just going to get in a car and I'm going to start driving towards wherever you live, and it's going to be a problem.
Gonna break your fucking knees, Danny.
The last thing I want to say is I started this journey on a new series that I'm going to be reading because I finished all of Demon Slayer, and I finished all of, what was the last book I was reading? Demon Slayer, I guess, was the big one that I finished last. I'm going to be reading Jujutsu Kaisen because everyone on the internet that I follow that's into manga seems to like this series. And so I read the 0.01 to 0.04, like the 0 chapter, and then I read chapters 1 through 3. I didn't know why I had to read 0 through 0.1 to 0.4. The 0 chapter made no sense in context with issues 1 through 3, but it turns out that I'm just a dummy, and the Shonen Jump app just puts those first, even though they weren't technically supposed to be the first thing you read. So anyways, I read the first 3 chapters, which is the most important here. This is by, I'm going to murder this first name. Is it Gage? Akutami?
Gege
Akutami, maybe? The story synopsis is: boy eats cursed finger. Boy becomes the, quote, only person in 1,000 years who could have done it. There's a high school. It's called the Jujutsu High School. There are demons that are called finger? Curses. Hold on. Hold on. We're going to get there. There's a loose definition or power set of these demons that are also known as curses. The first volume is about there's a bunch of curses at this school. This person shows up. He says, hey, I'm here to kill these curses or something. There's a cursed item here. And his buddy's like, this other character in the school is like, oh yeah, some of my friends said that they had a cursed item. And the guy's like, what do you mean? Take me to them. And then they find the people and they're like, oh yeah, we unwrapped it. It was gross. And then it turns out it was a finger of this cursed demon from 1,000 years ago. And so the end of the first chapter is this kid goes, well, I'll get rid of it. And he just fucking eats it. I'm like, okay, let's do this. This is really stupid. And that's pretty much the definition of this whole series. It's really stupid, but it's very fun. And the first 3 chapters are great in terms of just dumb shonen manga, and I'm all about that. And it's funny because last week we talked about Hellwarden Haguma, which is Renee's pick for the Goodreads Reading Challenge, and I feel like this is the exact same kind of book, and I don't understand why that one failed when this one is succeeding. But it's fun. It's fun and dumb, and I think it's really cool. I haven't gotten into like the hand motion thing that I think makes this series unique, but I'm excited to get there, and it's just cool little shonen book. So yeah, that's me. Let's dig into comics that are coming out in the upcoming week. Comics are dropping on August 11th, 2021. What are you both excited for this week? Let's start with you, Kate. Well,
you mentioned our Goodreads challenge, and it reminds me that I really need to get back to pulling books for that and reading them, want to do that. So add that to my list. But otherwise, I'm excited for a graphic novel coming out called Did You Hear What Eddie Gein? Yeah. Did you hear what Eddie
Gein or Gein?
Yeah, okay. Did you hear what Eddie Gein done? It is a nonfiction graphic novel about the Gein family and what led to the creation of the necrophile who haunted the dreams of 1950s America. Sorry, Danny, who is in the chat saying that he doesn't want anything dark and depressing. but it inspired a lot of now like classic horror films like Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs. And apparently they just did a ton of research, and I don't know, this stuff is really interesting, horrifying. We'll see how gory it is. If they lean too hard into the necrophile stuff, I'm probably ducking out. But
Sure.
This is a team that, like, okay, hold on. I missed a person. Eric Powell and Harold Schechter are the author and artist. But it's a team that has like won Eisners, so I feel like it'll be pretty good. It is definitely like one of those guilty pleasures where I always feel like we shouldn't be fascinated by this stuff, but here we are. So
yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this book, if only because I think it's really interesting that someone is doing a book about Ed Gein, and that is like, or Ed Gein, and that's like disgusting. But I think that Eric Powell, I'm hoping that based on the just summary that you can find on Amazon, that they do it in like a really careful, like documentary style way, the same way that like Durf Backdurf did, has done some of his stuff. Like his Kent State book is very, very pointed.
My Friend Dahmer is my favorite one in this vein of OGNs about true crime, for sure. But I'm jazzed for it. I also have the next volume of Witch Boy sitting here from my library that I picked up yesterday. So if it is too heart-wrenching and horrifying, I do have that palate cleanser to just like wash over myself.
Yeah.
Oh, and finish Kodi, obviously.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
So my pick for this week, it's a mini series that I've been reading. It's Spider-Man Spider's Shadow, and issue number 5 is coming out this week. If you haven't been following the series, I do think it's really cool. It's sort of the story of what if when Peter Parker came back with the Venom symbiote, what if he had embraced it a little more? And what if the villains had just pushed him a little harder while he had that dark influence in his head? What might have happened? So it's the story of him basically becoming Venom and beginning to cut a bloody swath through Spider-Man's villains.
What?
Until they all band together to try and stop him with the help of J. Jonah Jameson.
Am I picking up this value or this issue? What the hell?
Well, that's not all that happened before issue 5. So.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, it's a 5-issue miniseries, so this is the finale. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. This was written by Chip Zdarsky with art by Pasquale Ferry, colors by Matt Hollingsworth, and letters by Joe Carmagna. It's pretty cool. Like, I know the temptation of like, what if good character but bad is like a thing that gets done so often, but this one is done really well. It also features the Fantastic Four quite a bit more than I thought it would. Because, you know, Peter goes to the Baxter building for help when he's got this whole alien parasite thing he's dealing with. So I think the last thing we saw was like a Venom infected Reed Richards choke slamming Johnny Storm while symbiote infected Ben Grimm was outside fighting the Avengers or something like that. Like,
okay,
it felt like a fever dream, which is why I'm having trouble like encapsulating it.
That sounds fantastic.
But it's very fun. I'm really enjoying it, and it's only 5 issues, and issue 5 is coming out this week, and it's gonna be bittersweet. I'm gonna miss it when it's gone. What about you, Mike?
Well, for me, I've got a great book, but before we get into that, I do want to shout out our Discord, or folks that are hanging out with us on Discord. Their picks for this week. Furret is picking the Bleach one shot that's coming out, I think, this week, or maybe came out this past week. And Danny is picking Pennyworth #1. Although in the chat, Danny did say that he wanted to change his pick to the Bleach one shot. So I guess they're both picking the Bleach one shot because who else is exciting about Tite Kubo having more manga? Because I certainly am. I'm also excited for that. But it's not my pick for this week. My pick for this week is the unbelievable Unteens #1. This is Jeff Lemire and Tyler Crook. It's a story about a comic book creator whose creation comes to life at a comic book convention, and things are going to get weird because sure, let's just get 1,000% meta. I'm fine with that. More so than the Black Hammer series did on its own. So I don't know why this book needs to take place in the Black Hammer universe, but it has like the Black Hammer universe like title across the top. So I'm interested in what is being offered here. That being said, I'm mostly buying this book just because I want more Tyler Crook art in my life. If you didn't get a chance to read the Dr. Weird miniseries that Tyler Crook did with Jeff Lemire, I highly recommend it, if only because it is absolutely gorgeous. The story is okay, but the art is unfucking believable, and it's probably one of the best looking books in the entire Black Hammer run as far as I'm concerned. But my pick this week is The Unbelievable Unteens #1. That looks exciting. And yeah, we're going to take a quick break, though. When we come back, we're going to be talking about spoilers. I think I titled this on our Discord, The Spoils of Spoiling Spoilers, but I think we're going to talk a little bit more than just that. So we'll be back in just a second. Do you want to explore the multiverse? What if you had your very own device that could allow you to do just that? Where would you go? What would you find? These are the kinds of questions that await Fletcher Cross in the hot new comic anthology Fletcher Cross: The Multiverse Awaits. You can back this awesome book at bit.ly/FletcherCross. When the arrogant engineer Fletcher Cross steals his greatest invention, the Dimensionalizer, things go haywire quickly as Fletcher finds himself lost within the expanse of the multiverse with no way home. Edited by Kyler Morrell and Derek Crow, with wonderful and exciting stories by 26 different artists and writers, this anthology weaves 18 different tales while also telling a single narrative that sees Fletcher be changed by his experiences. Back Fletcher Cross: The Multiverse Awaits on Kickstarter today, and you can get over 120 pages of stunning storytelling and art, as well as other reward tiers for comic lovers and comic creators. Back this book now at bit.ly/FletcherCross.
Hey, I Read Comic Books audience, this is Anthony Desiato. I directed the My Comic Shop Country documentary film, and now I host a podcast called Digging for Kryptonite. Digging for Kryptonite explores the creative visions that have shaped Superman across time and media. We recently spent 3 episodes on the pre-crisis version of the character, and coming up we have a 6-part event that will explore the John Byrne era and the years leading up to and including the death and return of Superman, which is how I got my start as a Superman fan and as a comics reader generally. The show comes out every other Wednesday and is available on all major podcast platforms. I hope you will check out Digging for Kryptonite. Thank you.
For our show this week, we are talking about spoilers, just in general, just the idea of spoilers, how we feel about spoilers, what we like, what we don't like about spoilers. But before I get into that, I do want to say we have an IRCB movie club coming up at the end of this month, and I don't really talk about that show enough on this like public show, but it's a thing that Brian, Paul, and I have been doing for I think 7 episodes. This will be the 7th episode. Where we're going to be talking about My Friend Dahmer. We talked about that for a minute earlier today, but we're going to be discussing the film My Friend Dahmer and the comic that it is based on. And it's a really great time. It's probably one of the most fun like series that we've just been doing on and off for about 2 years now. It's really been great. Just me, Paul, and Brian. So if you get a chance, check it out on the Patreon. Go to patreon.com/IRCB podcast, and you can listen to the back episodes. The last one we did, Josie and the Pussycats, we had Kara Shamborsky show up. It was a wild ride, absolutely wild. I didn't realize how formative that movie was for me. So go check that out and get ready. At the end of this month in August, we're going to be dropping the My Friend Dahmer episode. So get hyped. But yeah, let's go into spoilers. I guess that was a little bit of a spoiler. I'm sorry for the people at home. Spoilers for what's coming down the line on the Patreon feed. But yeah, I thought about this topic for a little while. I was thinking, spoilers are a thing. They're, any fiction, any media, whatever, they're spoilers. I know people that hate getting spoiled about sports. They're like, I don't want you to tell me who won the big basketball game. I want to actually go home and watch the recording that I have at home. Obviously in comics, they drop on Wednesday. I'm really curious to know what you guys think about spoilers in general, with that half-finished thought in mind. What do you guys like? I guess, do you have issues with spoilers? Do you like spoilers? Are you the type of person that, like, even if something gets spoiled, you don't really care because you want to experience it yourself? What are your thoughts? I guess we'll start with you, Brian.
I have a very specific definition of like what a spoiler is to me.
Okay. Okay.
Because in my mind, a spoiler is something plot or story related that is revealed before you watch the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I should say right now, like, we're going to be having a discussion about spoilers. There's a pretty good chance we might drop some spoilers in this conversation.
Okay, this is true.
Like, I tried to make sure in my notes that, like, I didn't spoil anything that's more recent than, like, 2 years ago. But
well, Brian, in your notes, you actually just wrote the word rosebud over and over and over.
Yeah, Rosebud's the sled, by the way.
Oh, Brian.
It's fine. The movie sucks. Save your time. I just say that to get the film majors riled up.
Yeah, please.
But to go back to our topic, like the kind of example I have in mind is like if somebody says like, you know, I just watched Ant-Man and Luis is so funny. Like that's not a spoiler. That doesn't like reveal anything to me. But if someone's like, oh man, can you believe who got dusted at the end of Infinity War? Like I would have like thrown hands in that situation. Yeah. And that was tough to avoid. Let me tell you, people were excited to talk about that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, that definition, I think, is pretty standard. I mean, I know some folks that are just like, I don't want to know anything about this movie or this TV show. Like, don't tell me anything. I want to take it all in, like, on my own without any influence or anything. And I get that to a certain point. You know, like, I feel like reading comic reviews, even that are spoiler free, but with a rating on them, kind of can influence my view of a book, or it can set me up with maybe some unnecessary expectations. But again, is that a spoiler, or is that just my own processing, like review meta, the commentary on top of reading fiction? You know, so
yeah,
go ahead,
I
Kate.
definitely like, I could see where you like not want to go into things like totally blind, and I get that, but I don't think of that as spoilers. I definitely have the same idea in my head of them as Brian was saying, of like some major plot points that are, you know, supposed to be hidden, and now you know them in advance. Like you find out that the boy sees dead people, right? Like, you know, like it's that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And Danny mentioned in the chat right at the start of this segment that he said, I hate spoilers when they come from a place of evil, when you spoil stuff for clout or to be gatekeeping or just being an asshole. And I'm like, yes, that is exactly, that's like half my notes for this episode are my experiences with shitty comics boys in college, using it as like a gatekeeping bullshit thing because they were throwing huge amount of monies on comics when most of us were reading from the library because college, like who has tons of money for floppies in college, right? So
yeah, Mike, who spends a lot of money on floppies in college?
I don't. Listen, I went to school.
Yeah. So I like at the time. So when I was in college and I was doing comic book club and stuff like that, I like had you know how there's like not necessarily popular kids, but kids with more social power in a group, right? Maybe they're just louder. Maybe people just don't like saying no to them. I think it was more that people were more intimidated by the two specific people I have in mind. One was comic book club. The other was like gaming club. But in both cases, it was just like, well, if that's what people say, because I hadn't really worried about it until college because I wasn't reading comics before college. And what I did consume in media, like TV and movies at that point, we didn't have like streaming and stuff. So you'd constantly see like a preview for next week when you hadn't seen last week and stuff like that on TV, or things out of order because they're reruns and stuff like that. And I was always behind on movies and everything. So like I didn't worry about it for that. And then books, like I had a good group of nerd friends. They weren't about to tell me the spoilers to Lord of the Rings. I would have been upset if it happened, but it just like never came up because people were cool. So like I got to college and they're like, oh, here's the thing. If it's been out for a month, you're allowed to like talk all about it and blah, 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 even though you know that other people, and even if people would say, hey, I'm going to read that still, please don't say anything. And I was just like, well, if that's how it works, I guess. I mean, it sucks because the trade doesn't come out like in a month from a single issue, right? But so what ended up happening is during those years, I just had, because they're DC fanboys, I'm just saying, DC fanboys, there's a type. Not like, it's not all DC fanboys. It is a segment.
And not just DC fanboys.
Yeah, okay, no, it's not just DC. But no one was out here being like a weird gatekeeping jerk about Image, let's say.
Sure.
But
that's
like,
because there's no one reading Image comics is like, please just be the one other person that I know that's reading Wicked and Divine, please.
Well, this was also during the era of like Walking Dead being huge, so I guess there was still
that's
like
true.
But no, so like multiple DC character deaths got spoiled for me, and like major plot points in that like DC universe when I was actually reading that stuff. And because I was both trade waiting, but also waiting for the trade to show up at my local library and me to get my hands on it. So I was, behind. And it was very much that, like Dana was saying, that the gatekeepy way of like, well, you're not a real comics fan if you're not, reading it, right when it comes out, and dropping all this money on it. And like in retrospect, like years later, I found out like one of them's grandma paid for all his comics. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Boy.
Like 200 some a month, and then shipped them to him from like his hometown. And then the other took out huge student loans, like ended up failing out of school, and was spending his loans on living the high life that, getting all the comics and newest video games and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, okay. And so like once I like, there was kind of that like, oh, actually, kind of get it out of that circle. I'm like, that's just a jerk move. That's just bullshit. Like,
right. It's that side of like toxic comics stuff in general. I think you get this with media in general, where there are people
video games has the same people.
Sure. And there's just like a snobbery, like a lording over people to be like, I know more than you. And it's, it's the same bullying tactics that people have used for years, is just transferred into a different way of like a sense of insecurity. Like, and I say this as someone, like, I had recognized that in myself at some point, of just being like, I need to know all the things. I'm going to be an asshole to people who don't know that. And then you come to find that like, that's not the way to make friends. And that's not the way to actually establish good relationships with people in general. I hopefully, fingers crossed, those people grew out of that, because how many years ago that happened. But still, I understand that mentality, and it's hard to break, I will say.
Yeah.
Because I'll fully admit, like I think that I had that for a little while with some people, but then I also had the desperation of, please God, someone else that I know read comics so I can talk about it. And now you guys are here, so thanks.
Well, and that's where I've ended up, is like after college is when I became friends with you guys, like right after. And our friend group, I deeply appreciate the way that we do it, where you just ask first. If someone says they're planning to read or watch a thing and would prefer no spoilers, we just respect them. Like, yeah, okay. And just don't be a jerk. So like the last time I remember this coming up is like you and Zander wanted to talk like stuff that happens in The Expanse. And it was like, oh yeah, that's like on my queue as the next thing to watch after I finish Battlestar Galactica. I'm slow to get to all of these things because grad school is the whole thing. But and actually I watched the pilot last night, but that's not a whole nother story. But yeah, and it's just like, oh, okay, just talk when the person isn't there about it, or talk in generalities that like don't spoil stuff. I feel like that is very much just like a more adult way of interacting and like being respectful.
Which kind of brings me to the point of like that I've been thinking about is have you ever had something seriously spoiled for you, and like what was it, and how did you react to it? Which I don't know, Brian, I'm curious to know if you're, because I think you and I have the same thing. That was like the big spoiler moment for us.
Yeah, I think that, and again, spoilers for a 12-year-old book or whatever. But when Harry Potter 6 came out and everybody found out that Dumbledore dies at the end, like if I had been a couple years younger or older, or I don't know, if I had been more online, I guess that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
Then that definitely would have been a huge spoiler for me, and I would have been livid. As it was, I was like a lonely nerd reading these books by myself.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so, like, I didn't
like I think I remember seeing something about that, but it's been long enough that I can't really remember.
My big childhood spoiler was my little sister, because that's how little sisters are. And probably just siblings, but like, so when the Harry Potter books would come out, we would buy 2 copies so that we would read them at the same time, because no way was I letting her spoil shit. Like,
yeah, I the only reason I was asking Brian about this is because he said Harry Potter 6. My first thought was Harry Potter 6, I think, was the first big thing that I ever felt truly spoiled for. Like, I went to the midnight release of Harry Potter at Harry Potter 6 at Barnes and Noble.
Yep.
I waited in line, hung out with my friends, and we were like super amped to get this book. I get the book, I come home, I start reading from the minute I get home until I'm ready to go to bed. And of course, the last thing I do is I get online because and hear me out. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I get online, and it's not like I had Facebook or Reddit or anything. I was just online doing whatever I did online at 4 a.m. when we had dial up, and that was the only time I could freely use the internet without someone asking me to stop. And out of the blue, this guy that I knew from college or from high school sends me a message, and he goes, "Hey Mike, what's up?" And I'm like, "Oh, nothing. It's really late. I'm about to go to bed." And he's like, "Oh, cool. Page 626. And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You bought the Harry Potter book, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Page 626. That happens." And I said, "What are you fucking talking about?" I had read half the book at this point.
No, what a
and
jerk.
he said that, and then I said, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "See ya," and then just signed offline.
What?
Like, he straight up gave me the full spoiler and everything, and I was like, "Are you?" I was
Oh
so
my God.
livid. And if you remember, after this time, right, there was stories on the news about people driving by Harry Potter release parties and just screaming the big spoiler at the end of that. Like, I don't know if I just remember this being such a thing, and I remember being just fucking livid about it. Now, I'm sure, I don't know if this kind of stuff happens anymore. I feel like there's so much media out there that it's hard to gauge what you could spoil for people to make them feel bad. And again, what is the mentality of this kind of thing? But at the same time, it's not like you can walk up into a convention and be like, blah blah blah, some big spoiler for Game of Thrones, and half the people are gonna go, "Yeah, I read the books, screw you," like, no one cares. I guess there's not like an easy way to necessarily do that. Plus, it's usually regarded as just a bad thing to do, and it's very few people that even want to do it. So
right.
I feel like the mentality of this has gone away, because for the most part, I feel like a lot of people are pretty, at least, honest with like, "Hey, I'm going to spoil this thing," at least in my feeds on the internet.
I do wonder how much of it has gone away versus we're just not interacting with teenage boys anymore. Like, I do wonder if we were interacting with a bunch of like 17-year-olds, if it's still a thing. I don't actually know. Yeah. The things for me recently have all been like from the internet. Even like, obviously, like when Game of Thrones was a thing each week, I like would fully not go on social media like Twitter and stuff like that and Reddit until after I'd watched the episode, because they're just rampant with those. But even without that, I had some major spoilers for that show come up when, you know how like if you don't turn them off, a lot of internet browsers will have like suggested news articles like right on the search page, below the bar.
Oh, mine opens to a blank tab on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I have since changed it to after a major character death spoiler in Game of Thrones. When I just like opened fucking Google Chrome, and there it was, like a big headline about it, and I was like, "Are you serious right now?" Right. And then like, so I think that is like the just internet writ large is where I see them now, and it only comes up when it's like big cultural things like that. I don't really know how you describe it, but like the phenomena type stuff where it's like, oh, everybody was watching Game of Thrones, and so then it's like a big thing every time. Yeah. Versus like right now, I really don't feel like I have anything like that. The last one I remember, honestly, was Tiger King, where everyone was talking about that. And that was start of last summer. So
you really got to be careful with these Marvel shows.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like I missed an episode or two of Loki, and I didn't see any spoilers.
I haven't.
I think I'm just fortunate. I think I'm just lucky. I'm just so lucky. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I remember when WandaVision was coming out, like, which, if you don't know, the way Disney Plus does things is they release their shows at midnight Pacific time. So that's 3 a.m. Eastern. So I got up for work at like 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, okay, time to check Twitter, like I always do. And there's WandaVision spoilers for the thing that came out 4 hours ago. I'm just like, can't you just give me the day? Like, give me 24 hours at least.
Well, it was so bizarre though when Mandalorian came out. I feel like there was a 24-hour breathing period for the first episode.
You're right.
Right? That big huge spoiler in the first episode of Mandalorian. I feel like there was a breathing room. Like, people were drastically going out of their way, like showrunners saying like, hey, can we give people a day to watch this thing before we start to make the memes and all that stuff? So I don't know.
Well, and I feel like news sites have gotten slightly better about it too, or at least like slightly more aware of like what they put in just their titles, so that like even if you don't click it, you see that. At least it seems better to me, or I'm just not running across it. Do you guys ever do some of the stuff? I know some people go like really into it where they're blocking certain hashtags and certain keywords and stuff like that when they're trying to avoid spoilers online. Do you guys do any of that?
Oh yeah.
That seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
I mean, on Twitter, I blocked like when the Star Wars movies were coming out, Last Jedi and for Rise of Skywalker, you know, for whatever Rise of Skywalker was. I still block like Star Wars, Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, Rey, all that stuff, because I just didn't want to see anybody talk about it. I didn't want any reaction because I wasn't going to go see it immediately, and so on and so forth. And so like I just didn't want to hear anything about it. And the same thing with Mandalorian. I think when it first came out, and Endgame and Infinity War, I think I blocked a lot of those hashtags and character names just for like 7 days, just to like get them on my thing. Because the Twitter like muting feature is actually a little smart, and that you could be like, block this forever, block it temporarily, you know, yada and stuff like that. So yeah, I do that, I guess, is the short answer there.
Yeah, I try to just be quick on getting on stuff, even though like I shouldn't have to. Like that's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
But I most things that I'm excited about, I'm gonna consume within like 48 hours of their release if I can. So I worry less about that. It's easy for me to just like, I don't know, not read Twitter as closely. I've gotten really good at just like skimming over things. So as soon as I see like something Star Wars, I can immediately just like shut my brain off until that's off my screen.
Right.
I just have not been using Twitter in a long time.
I mean, that's the healthy thing to do, but that's not where I'm at.
Smartest in the bunch here.
I do end up on Reddit front page and stuff. Like, I just get spoiled elsewhere, you know. So
because we talked a little bit about like the malicious asshole spoiler brigade of people like intentionally trying to spoil. I do think that is like less common now, but what is a lot more common is this idea, and any little brothers out there, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. This I'm just gonna swing my arms, and if you get hit, it's your fault.
Yep. Exactly.
Concept of like, it's not my responsibility to make sure you don't get spoiled, so I'm gonna post every thought that farts into my head about this new thing because it's very important the entire world knows what I think.
Sure.
And if you happen to get spoiled, well, then you shouldn't be online, you big baby.
Yep.
Well, and it's weird because I think I do see that probably more often, and I feel like there is I feel like people also do that, but with the explicit action of like adding a hashtag where they're like, hey, if you don't want to see this, I'm going to post it, but I'm going to be using this hashtag, so mute this hashtag. And again, I'm speaking mostly from a Twitter perspective, because I feel like when you're on like Reddit and stuff, most fan-oriented subreddits are like, if you don't spoil this shit, we'll ban you. You know, like, because they understand like the problems that can arise when there's assholes on their subreddit.
Yeah,
so
they'll have like a pinned spoilers discussion or something like that. Exactly.
But yeah, like Twitter, I feel like there are a lot of people who are just like, if you get spoiled, it's too bad, so block this hashtag. It's like, well, I didn't even know that hashtag existed until I saw your spoiler tweet. So like, thanks, Jason, or whatever, you know, whatever name out there. But sorry, all the Jasons out there. I really apologize for that. But yeah, I get what you're saying is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And like, it's also, I do think that it's possible for spoilers to come just from a place of innocence. Like, I think that because there are some things that I would not consider a spoiler that other people do.
Yeah.
Or just thinking that the person has already seen or watched it. I feel like it's so easy online. Like you're talking about with the pinned like threads and stuff. Most things let you have a side conversation with like we use Telegram for our friend stuff. Just start a separate chat for everyone who's watched the thing. Or we did like with the Mandalorian, a lot of like, okay, everyone watch it by this day, and then we'll talk about it in here, or mute the chat if you haven't by then. You know, like it.
Right.
The technology does make it easy to do that stuff. So it's not saying like don't talk about it at all. It's just saying like don't talk about it in the public sphere where everyone can, you know.
Yeah. Well, and especially like with social media getting more and more algorithmically driven, it's becoming harder and harder to avoid that kind of stuff. Because like, you know, I'll use TikTok for an example. Like they know that I like a lot of Star Wars content. So if a new Star Wars thing is coming out and people are talking about it, that is going to get onto my TikTok for you page.
And I have no idea how to block anything on there. TikTok is just whatever they decide to stream directly into my eyeballs, and I just have zero control.
It's truly like with how they feed geese for foie gras.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's just this feed tube of memes and garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what you were saying before, Brian, about like not like unintentionally spoiling things.
Yeah, like there was a thing that I saw. I think it was probably a TikTok again.
Right.
It was like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and it was like a clip from the show. But having watched it, I was like, "There's nothing plot relevant in this. It's just Sam and Bucky being goofy for a second." And so I shared that, not considering that other people might think of that as a spoiler. So that's, you know, like, I understand that sometimes you slip up and you spoil something for people.
Yeah.
That doesn't make you a bad person.
Yeah.
You know, the important thing is to go, oh shit, I'm sorry, and try not to do it again.
This reminds me of that episode of IT Crowd where like the spoiler isn't that the actual like plot point. The spoiler that Roy gets is that there is a twist, and and then he's really upset because once he knows there is a twist, he's like thinking about it the whole time about like this is what's gonna like. It's just like
I mean, I can understand that though, because I think, like I said, you know, at the top of the topic, I said, you know, when it comes to like reviews, sometimes that can skew my perception on things.
Sure.
So like if someone tells me that like The Beach That Makes You Old has a twist in it, I'm gonna be looking for the twist the entire time. I mean, that's a bad joke about the M. Night Shyamalan movie that's coming out, but you know, I think after we all saw Sixth Sense, and like, spoilers if you haven't seen Sixth Sense or haven't already had it spoiled, but you know, the big plot reveal at the end that like, oh shit, Bruce Willis was the dead guy, or was dead. I mean, like, we're always looking for those types of wild twists because M. Night Shyamalan has done something to society. Like, I don't know what he did or who he paid to become that influential in the world, but you know, it's wild, and I think we're all looking at that. And so as soon as someone says, oh, there's a twist in this movie you won't see coming, and you know, I say that in comics all the time too, like there's a twist in this that made it really interesting. I see, part of me worries,
that's
does
not
that
a
have
spoiler for me, but it definitely could be for some people.
Right, but does that skew someone's perception of a book when they sit down and go, oh, what's the twist going to be in this book? And
changes the way you read it. Yeah, and in the same way, even just seeing like the rating for a movie on, you know, Rotten Tomatoes before I see it off will, like, I'm sure just subconsciously change a little bit of how I view it.
Sure.
So like I recently watched the Wonder Woman sequel for the first time and had heard lots before that it was not good, and went in, and I don't know. The thing is I think I would have not enjoyed it anyway. So I like lowered the expectations, you know, in an appropriate amount. Which is why that kind of thing doesn't bother me per se. Although I will say I don't read reviews of stuff that I haven't, like, that I'm going to read or watch or whatever, unless it's from a source that I am confident isn't going to do the BS where they're like, this review is actually just a synopsis of everything in it. Which is another thing Danny mentioned, is like, yes, I hate that so much. And there's certain news outlets that are really good about not doing that. And I'm going to like be a dork here, but NPR does great book reviews and stuff like that, where they like are, I mean, like, don't,
they're a professional organization, you know.
Yeah, they do a good job. So I trust them.
Tell me that NPR is more responsible than some hotshot dickhead who's just posting about comic books online.
Yeah, Vice or something. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like, clearly we've talked about spoilers over a long period of our lives. I mean, like, do you think as you guys have gotten older that your approach or your feelings on spoilers have changed, like for the better, for the worse? Are you more strict or are you less strict? Or have you built up habits to try to just avoid spoilers in general, like not opening the Reddit front page when there's a big release of something or something along those lines?
Like everything else in my life, I think I'm just getting old and tired.
Okay.
Because I don't get as mad about spoilers as I used to. It's just that moment of like, I'll open Twitter and be like, come on, man.
Yeah.
I was going to watch that this afternoon.
Brian opens Twitter. It's like, oh, my knees hurt.
Yeah. When my knees hurt, I can tell that there are spoilers on my feed.
Right. In 9 hours, I will be spoiled for the next Loki episode.
Yeah, like we were talking about, my view definitely changed when I got outside of those groups in college and was just like, oh, actually, that was just those guys being like pretentious jerks, and it's not the way I want to be or the kind of friends that I want to have, and have kind of stuck it the way we do it ever since, of just being polite about it. And I definitely, I just, because I don't mess with filters and stuff, if there's something big, like when we were all watching Game of Thrones, last season or whatever, I just don't open, like you were saying, front page and stuff like that. I do still go on like my very specific subreddits that like are talking about a specific, completely different thing than that. And just like fingers crossed that no one mentions it. Which has only not worked out for me once. And it was a really mild thing that was like one of those things that like you could kind of see coming in other episodes. And it was just like, oh, well, that definitely happens. So yeah.
Are you telling me like you went to like a Pokemon subreddit and someone spoiled like The Walking Dead? Like, is it that kind of like these things shouldn't be related?
It was spoilers for Game of Thrones. It was a dragon death, and it was on a diet and health subreddit for like getting in shape. It was like, you bitch, you skinny bitch, how dare you?
I see. Okay, that weird, but you know what, it is the internet.
It's
so
true.
Anything's possible.
It's completely true. Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed as I've gotten older, and just after reading comic books for so long, is that a lot of the spoilers in Big Two comics don't really affect me anymore. I think with the exception of Hoxpox, I feel like Big Two spoilers don't really matter to me because they aren't long lasting.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing. Are
you saying characters don't stay dead?
Well, yeah, I mean, like characters dying or characters changing or just, having different motives, or suddenly they're the bad guy, suddenly they're the good guy. Like none of that stuff really bothers me. And I see it from time to time, but I also feel like the comic book world that I'm following on the internet is not the same as it was, like 6, 7, 8 years ago, where people are out there spoiling things constantly. Or if I do see something, like, again, I think Fur made a really interesting point earlier, saying that like, I don't care if you spoil something that I'm not following, but as soon as I start to follow it, I would prefer if you didn't tell me that like what's going to happen or talk about the plot with me, because at the time, like, if you don't really care, like, it doesn't matter if someone spoils a TV show for me that I'm not watching. Like, if you tell me what happens at the end of Superstore, like, that's fine, okay, whatever. But if I start watching it, don't tell me about it. I totally agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, I only care if it's like on my to watch or to read pile. Like, there's so many things that, like, I mean, you guys talk all the time about like Avatar: The Last Airbender and stuff, and I'm like, I'm never gonna make it to the end of that show. I don't care.
But it's really good, and you should.
I keep trying. Okay, I keep trying. And same with like some other stuff like that. But I think the other thing that's changed for me as I just got like, I don't know, more confident in like, yes, my way is the right way, is I will at work preemptively, like when someone starts talking about things, like, because we pre-pandemic, I was in an open office set up in Grand Rapids, and then when I moved to do like PhD here, it is a slightly less open in the sense that we have cubicle walls, but they're like those half walls. So
sure.
If two people are talking, you can definitely hear them. And so you'd come in, we all roll in at like 10 a.m. because no one gets up in the morning. And then people start talking about last night's thing, blah, blah, blah. And I will just preemptively like, I haven't seen it yet, please don't spoil it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then like, don't talk about it. But like, so jumping in is, I guess, a new thing for me in the sense of like the last few years. Particularly because I'm around people who I know would not want to spoil it for me. I don't think I'd do that if I was just around like general people, but like, I know you guys and my friends here, like you'd do the, oh no, I stepped on your toes, I'm so sorry. Like, so like being in advance, like, hey, that's my toe. No, back up.
Hey, my toe's here.
My toe's here.
I'm wearing sandals. Everybody be careful.
That's right. Get your stompy cowboy boots away from them. Yeah, so we definitely do that, especially because it turns out there's like you'll be shocked to hear a really, really big overlap between people who work in computer science research and people who are really into sci-fi, fantasy, and comics. So who would have guessed? Who would have guessed?
I don't believe it. Bunch
of freaking nerds, and so we all end up reading like the same books as they're coming out, and a fair amount of like the same comics and stuff. So yeah. The most recent one has been screaming no spoilers for the new Andy Weir book, because I have not read Hail Mary yet, and there's
I have.
Yeah.
So Brian, here's what happens right now.
Here's my toe. Here's my toe right here, Brian. I dare you.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we went through a lot of the notes and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys had any last thoughts about spoilers before we wrap up here.
I certainly don't impose my time limit on other people, but I do kind of accept like a month as my spoiler cap. Like if something came out a month ago and I still haven't gotten to it and I get spoiled online about it, at that point, I'm not super mad anymore.
Yeah, for the internet, I'm not. The thing for me would be like if I said, hey, like this would come up in that college group.
If I did actually spoil Hail Mary.
Well, that, but like, yeah, like, oh, this came out a month ago, and you're like, hey, I'm gonna read that, please, and like, well, you should have already, and so they just then continue the conversation, and you're like,
sure,
asshole, like, and I'm required to be here at this thing, like, you can't even just leave. So I think that still makes me upset, but like, yeah, just being online, that's like just a fact of life at this point, I think.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for the conversation today, guys. Thanks, Danny and Ferd, for hanging out with us in the chat and contributing. We really appreciate it. Just to wrap up here, I'm going to start doing this thing where I give you guys a heads up about what's coming out with new episodes, the next episode next week. So next week the topic is I'll buy that for $1, and talking about comics after you've dug through the dollar bin, finding cheap comics that are not free and talking about them. Me and Nick and Paul are going to be talking about that next week. So look forward to that. You can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Brian at BrianHead. You can follow me at Mike Rapin, and you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram.
This episode first aired on Patreon, and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. You can join today for exclusive series like the IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, Giant Days of Our Lives, and more. You can join now at patreon.com/IRCB Podcast. And if you haven't already, please rate and review our show. Give us 5 stars. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. It'll really help us spread the word about IRCB.
You can also join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more, and listen to our episodes live as we record at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. And it would also help us a lot if you tell your friends or your local comic shop about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. We can't thank them enough. Zander is the cool guy who makes this show sound great, and he's just a fun person to talk to. I want to say thanks again to Brian and Kate, and thanks to Danny and Fur for hanging out with us recording live. Thanks to everyone out there who listens to the show. You are wonderful human beings, and we appreciate you so much. Until next time, comics are good, and so are you. A lot of thoughts on that. I don't know why I feel so attached to it, but
yeah, you got us there for it.
Listen for it.
Okay.
Hey, Kate.
I have returned.
Okay.
I am here.
Yep. I'm pretty sure whoever started this like urban myth that eating a handful of almonds is like a great and filling snack. It's like a practical joke that they were trying to play on me. And
cut their pinkies off.
It's such bullshit. 12 almonds does not do it for me. And so I just did that. I had my sad diet 12 almonds for my snack.
Have you tried 13 almonds? Because I hear that's the.
You know what?
But that's the devil's number, Michael.
Oh shit!
That's how you summon Nut Satan.
Oh Jesus!
Would you say that's the devil's nuts?
We are not doing phrasing today at all.
That's the kind of content you only get on a live show. Like Xander's not putting this in. Xander,
Nope.
I challenge you to put this in.
Put this in, Zander. Put in Nut Satan.
I dare you.
Show title.
Yeah.